Good Wednesday morning, everyone. I just want to start off by saying I'm not in the Illuminati. You can't believe your eyes. Are you going to believe what you see or what I tell you? This is, no, truly, I'm not in the Illuminati. That is not my third eye there. Okay. But I am a Freemason. And I don't know if my dues are paid up in the Illuminati, but I think they're paid up as a Mason. And well, that's kind of what I want to talk to you about, because many years ago, back in 2000 something, I wrote a book sort of at the request of my former publisher and editor when she was with the Wiser organization, Miss Brenda Knight, to write a book about the Knights Templar, Freemasonry, and the Illuminati, that kind of style of a book, and something to do with Solomonic magic. And she put me in touch with Brad Olson of CCC Publishing, and I thought, well, why not? It sounds like fun. It sounds like a fun thing. And it came out, and it's done quite well. And but I really wanted to make it sort of a serious book of some historic and literary value. And the more I got into it, the more intrigued I became about the whole thing. And it coincided with my formal association or initiation into Freemasonry. And it's sort of a long story, and I've talked about it a great deal in my morning talks. But the bottom line to the whole thing and my research at the time concerned and pivoted around the fabled story of King Solomon. King Solomon's a big guy in magic. King Solomon's a big guy in masonry. And I wanted to just have a paragraph, a footnote of something I could say about the actual empirical reality, historic details of King Solomon. You know, when he was born, when he died, some details of his life that I could reference in my book. And you know, I couldn't come up with anything that wasn't written in the Bible or the legends of Islamic literature, 1001 Arabian Nights and things like that talk about Solomon. Okay, but no details, no dates, no things that you hear about or can dig up about pharaohs much older, and Babylonian and Persian kings and things like that. You know what toothpaste they used, you know. But I couldn't come up with anything. And the more I Doug, well, I said, well, certainly I could come up with something about King David. Well, there's plenty about King David in the Bible, but nowhere else. The point is, there is no hard, real live evidence that would strongly support the historic existence of these Old Testament characters. And there is plenty empirical evidence of other cultural events taking place during that same period when all of this golden age of the Old Testament was supposedly happening. And not that someday there might not be discovered some, and that would make everybody happy. But actually, there isn't. So far, there isn't any. Now, what does all this have to do with the Knights Templar and things like that? Well, I kind of explain it in this book. And the bottom line is that if you really wanted to be an objective observer, we have to take the tale of Solomon, King David, his father, Saul, and things like that. We have to take them as fable, legend, mythology, which may have been based on originally on true flesh and blood characters, but certainly not to the degree that it is presented to us in Scripture. So it's holy history and not history. Now, what does all of this have to do with Masonry and things like that? That's what I try to explain here, because the central myth of Masonry is built on Bible stories. And Masons are encouraged and taught to consider the Bible as a standard of truth. And but Masons are never obliged to consider the Bible as historic. Spiritual literature, historic fact. They're both good, okay? But to treat the spiritual literature as historic fact is a recipe for trouble. Trouble like Crusades. Trouble like Divine Right of Kings. Trouble like wholesale cultural mental illness. So this morning I woke up to a Google alert on my phone, and it was an extended review of The Key to Solomon's Key, my book. Now, there's been other reviews over the years, and most of them very kind. Okay. But this review, which is extended, and I've posted the link to it. Please read it, because it'll do much more than my little talk with you this morning will do. The reviewer got it. She got my intention, my bottom line for writing the book. She actually, the light bulb that I was hoping to turn on over everybody's head by writing this book so many years ago, it went off over her head. And I really encourage you to get it. And if she got it, you can get it. And if you don't have this, please get it, read it, enjoy it, think about it, chew on it. But anyway, I go to great lengths drawing parallels with Masonic teachings and Masonic ritual concerning this fact that in Masonry we're encouraged and obliged to learn our Masonic lessons through Bible stories, but the stories use biblical characters, but presents them in a non-biblical context. Almost as if to say, these stories are really great, these stories are sacred, these stories are archetypally wonderful, but they're not historic. So go ahead and give yourself permission to view them as mythology. Give yourself permission, free yourself from the obligation of mindless, blind faith that they are also history. And it obliges the thoughtful Mason to be a spiritual grown-up. And somewhere, for me, it is clear that Masonry, either by degree, accident, or synchronicity, quietly affords her sons the opportunity to become, as it were, spiritual grown-ups. Good men made better by their work in the craft. Men whose concept of God is big enough to take a hit or two. Admittedly, this new view of the Old Testament is a pretty big hit. But unless we're blinded by superstitious or bigotry, the readjustment of a few dates, and the ability to distinguish between sacred mythology and viable history needn't destroy Scripture's place in our hearts as an unerring standard of truth and justice. So, about this far into the text, we do that to the Old Testament. Let's see. But what about the New Testament? Let's see. The majority of Masons, at least in the United States, are Christian. And I'm happy to say that there's always been many Jewish Masons. There are Muslim Masons. Masonry in the United States, which for years was split into white Masons and black Masons, and now, thank God, Masonry is much more integrated. That was a major objection, kept me out of Masonry for years, 50 years. I was 50 when I joined the Masons. But a majority of Masons are Christians. We might now ask, how do Masonic ideals square with the New Testament? In the second degree of Masonry, the senior deacon, in his magnificent middle chamber lecture, and it's monetarily, it's a monetarily delivered thing. In other words, the lecture is published. It's not a secret. I'm not giving away any Masonic secrets. I've pledged to keep secret, not in any of this book. So don't get excited. You'll not learn the handshake. In the second degree of Masonry, the senior deacon, in his magnificent middle chamber lecture, delivers what might be viewed as a hit to the fundamental doctrine of Christianity, or at least modern Christianity. Standing between the stately pillars of the temple, he instructs the candidate that he is to pay, quote, rational homage to the deity, unquote, and informs him of the nature and meaning of operative masonry. By that term, we allude to the proper application of the useful tools of architecture, and that these rules do not only display the effects of human wisdom, they also demonstrate that a fund of science and industry is implanted in man for the best, most salutary, and most beneficent purposes. Unquote. What edifying words. What positive and encouraging words for a good man to hear at the beginning of his travels to become a better man. Who on earth could disagree with these words? Paul. The Apostle Paul would have violently disagreed, and I believe it's highly likely the Knights Templar, who are like spiritual forefathers of Masonry anyway. It's highly likely that the Knights Templar believe they had every reason to violently disagree with Paul. And in chapter 10, called the Crucifix, remember the Knights Templar confessed under torture that at their degree ceremony, when they were introduced to the order, they were required to spit on a crucifix that was laying on the ground. Not a cross, a crucifix with a body hanging on it. They were forced to step on it and spit on it, trod upon the crucifix. Let's see, I'm going to read just a little something before I close. Okay. We can only speculate exactly what the church doctrines were that the Templars supposedly rejected. And let's remember that it's the church doctrines established by Paul. We can only speculate exactly what church doctrines the Knights Templar rejected. But if there's even a scrap of truth hidden in the testimonies extracted through torture, then we are led to conclude that they despised, in particular, the veneration of the crucifix. Okay, and this is one of the most shocking. Oh, God, they must be Satanists. Oh, blasphemy. Oh, God, they're bad. They're bad news, you know. But you got to remember that the crucifix, that prior to the 7th century, okay, the symbol of Christianity was not the cross, was not the crucifix. It was the Good Shepherd. Okay? It would be like if you had a religion based around the story of the great labor organizer Joe Hill, and you made a religion out of it And instead of his work or the wobbly songbook or some other symbol of some kind, you had the symbol of him strapped to a chair and just shot in the heart. His dead, helplessly tied up dead body with a big hole in his heart in Utah. But I digress. Excuse me. Recall also that the same knights testified they were told at their initiation that Jesus was a man who died like all men die. And get this, this was the common belief among first century Christians. And those first century Christians, believe it or not, were actually the church, Jesus' own little circle of friends and family. First century Christians in Jerusalem were led by Jesus' own biological brother, James. It's in the Bible too. I'm not making this up. First century Christians believed Jesus was a man who died like all men die. They focused on his teachings, on his Gandhi-esque teachings. He was the good shepherd. They didn't have to believe that he went into the sky. They knew he didn't go in the sky. Where did all that come from? Okay. Including the followers of James, the biological brother of Jesus, who taught, among other things, that the simple act of following Jesus' example and applying his teachings to one's life was the way to salvation. This was not, however, the view of 12th century Church of Rome, which propagated the doctrines of original sin, the total depravity of man, and the imminent physical resurrection of all the buried corpses in the world. These doctrines were the inventions of Paul, a man who never met Jesus, a man with whom first century church in Jerusalem, led by James, had a significant, perhaps even violent, disagreement. Paul showed up in Jerusalem after he fell down, bumped his head, and all of a sudden saw Jesus.
And felt guilty for everything he did.
And then felt guilty for everything else he did in life. And obviously everything his mother did to him, too. Well, anyway, for nearly 500 years after the deaths of James, there's every indication that when Paul came back to Jerusalem to try to convert the real church and failed, that James ended up dead, mysteriously murdered. Now, Paul started his career by murdering Christians. That's what he felt so guilty about. And when he knew that James, the brother of Jesus, was standing in the way of his wild, new vision for Christianity, James ended up dead after a very public disagreement with Paul. For nearly 500 years after the deaths of James and Paul, Christianity was enmeshed in major ideological conflicts. And they were all over the nature of who Adam was. But anyway, that's enough. That's enough for me ranting today. Do you have anything to add, St. Constance?
No, but there is no sin.
You heard it straight from her mouth. There is no sin. The word of sin is restriction. Anyway, anyone, do you think the Illuminati would actually issue cards like this? Not bloody likely. But this is actually John Michael Greer, brilliant man, good friend, fellow Mason, truly reconstructed the degree ceremonies of the Bavarian Illuminati. And anyone who cared to go through them at a Pantheacon many years ago, he presented it. He mounted it right there at the Doubletree Hotel. And I had to go. Okay, so I just had to go. I think that's his magical Illuminati name, Frankenstein. And I think my name is Theseus. Theseus, not Theseus. Okay. Anyway, until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.